Hi, I'm Kelly and welcome to Kapowski Reads, and this is my October Reading Scottish wrap-up. And this month I got through 5 books by Scottish authors, and there's a whole lot of noise going on, so I'm going to go and double check that the windows are closed and then talk about books. I'm back. You might see a theme with my Scottish reads this month, because with the exception of my book club book, they were all spooky, scary, creepy books. I may have planned it that way. I did. So I'm going to start with my book club book, which was There's Only One Danny Garvey by David F. Ross. This book is about Danny Garvey, who was a football prodigy, and he left his small town at 16, did football things, and he's returned back home 13 years later to coach the juniors team that he used to play for. And his return home kind of sets the wheels in motion for some secrets to be revealed. This book surprised me because it wasn't as much about football as I thought it was going to be. I don't like football. I don't really like watching a lot of sports. I would rather play the very few sports that I enjoy than watch them. Although, try and tear me away from watching bowls at the Commonwealth, because I love watching bowls. I could probably read a book about bowls. I don't know what it is. There's something about it that just... it's like hypnotic. Anyway, bowls, I enjoy watching. Football? No, I don't. But this book wasn't about football. It was just set on a backdrop of football. And this book really exceeded my expectations because it was more of a thriller. It was really twisty and turny, and I really enjoyed that. I liked that the twists and turns kind of dropped little breadcrumbs, so that kind of helped me to try and piece together what had happened in the past, what the big secret was, because I had my thoughts. I did not like any of the characters, with the exception of a very small child. I didn't like any of them, but I think that I don't want to give spoilers, so I'm going to just be very cryptic and say that Danny Garvey was a very unreliable narrator. So the characters that I as a reader got to know may or may not be accurate for those actual characters. I may have only read what Danny Garvey wanted me to read. And I know Danny Garvey's not real. I know he's a character, but it's from his point of view, and I think he was just putting across what he wanted to. I felt like every time I got really into this book, it would take a break to talk about football. I mean, not to just talk about football. There would be a football match, and the book would then describe the match in detail, and I didn't care about the football match. I did not care, and it would just take me out of the moment, which kind of, it meant I didn't enjoy the book as much as I did. If all of the sort of descriptions of football matches was to have been removed from this book, I think I would have enjoyed it even more. It would have been about half the length, but I think I would have given it like an extra 1.5 stars, because it was that loss of momentum that really kind of, it took me out of the moment. It did. I have said that this is a very twisty turny book, and I feel like I loved the twists and turns. And because there were so many, it was kind of easy to guess the bigger twists. I did see them coming, and I kind of thought at one point that sometimes I guess twists and I guess completely wrong. Just far too wrong. Completely unrealistic. And that happened with this book, but I was right. So there was a huge big twist that I thought, no way is that what I think it is? And it was. And that just blew my mind. So that was very unexpected, but it wasn't. Kind of was. Next book was a book that I put aside for October, and that's Things We Say in the Dark by Kirsty Logan. I actually bought this book last year after reading The Gracekeepers, which I got from my local library, but a lot of my friends had been reading this and I didn't have enough time to read it during the sort of spooky season. Decided I was going to buy it, put it aside, and I almost forgot about it, but then I didn't. So very glad about that, or I would have had to have waited another year. And this is a short story collection which explores women's fears and anxieties. And as a human ball of anxiety, I was kind of excited and terrified to go into this book because I kind of thought it was gonna maybe write stories about things that I'm terrified of, and it did. It's both good and scary. This was such a very spooky book. I don't even think spooky covers it because spooky kind of sounds cute. I've said terrifying already, but I kind of think I need to go with terrifying because that's the only word I can think of that really does this book justice. It was horrifying at parts because it dealt with topics that are real and rational fears. In addition to that, it had some of the sort of classic fears of spooky things that may or may not be real. It was very, very strange to read. The book was very, very strange. A lot of the stories were just super short, but they were so creepy. And I think that in future, when I reread this, because I think I will reread this, that I don't read it all over one day, because I read this in one day and that was stupid because I was so scared at bedtime to put the light out, but I had to because it was bedtime. I think next time I maybe read a couple of stories each day throughout the month. That seems like a far smarter choice. But I did think it was a really enjoyable scary book. Like, I liked the elements of fear that I was getting from this book. I am one who sometimes I like to be scared, and a lot of the times I don't. But I enjoyed being scared on this occasion. So clearly October 'tis the season to read creepy short story collections, because my next book was another creepy short story collection, and it was The Sinister Cabaret by John Herdman. And these short stories all surrounded a very, very overstressed, somewhat tired, exhausted solicitor called Donald Humby. He had taken some time off of work and he was going up to the Scottish Highlands to just have a break, to go and stay at a hotel or B&B that he had previously stayed at with his wife and enjoyed. He was going for a rest. He did not get a rest because all the while he is being haunted by a character called Mr. Motion, who is a very skilled imitator. And this book was unpredictable from start to finish. I'm still not 100% sure what even was real and what was in Donald's mind. I really enjoyed trying to guess and predict where Mr. Motion was going to show up because he was such a skilled imitator that he would just randomly show up and he would be a character that Donald had previously been speaking to and not even noticed that it was Mr. Motion. And I loved that. That kind of gave me almost a little bit of comedy amongst the very twisted tales that this book included. I think I really enjoyed this because it reminded me of The League of Gentlemen, which I used to love watching on BBC Two, maybe? BBC something. It was just creepy little stories that took place in a remote village for local people. And this book really gave me those creepy small town vibes. And I enjoyed that thoroughly. It was a perfect October read. There were some short stories that I didn't like in this book that just were a little bit too unnecessarily violent or kind of gross. So the stories that I did like, I really, really liked, but the stories I didn't like, I really didn't like. But it evened out. Next was another book that I put aside for October, and that was Hex by Jenni Fagan. Now I say I put it aside, this is very clearly a library book, it's so shiny, but I made a mental note to request it for October. And I did. I had seen so many of my friends read this book and I wanted to read it. And I really enjoy Jenni Fagan's writing, but I wanted to read it in October because it felt Octobery. This is just a little novella, super, super tiny, a little novella, 100 pages max. It tells the story of Galis Duncan, who has been condemned as a witch and sentenced for execution. She is in the dungeons in Edinburgh, and the entire book takes place the night before her execution. A mysterious visitor called Iris suddenly appears in her cell and claims to be from the future. And that's what this book is about. For a teeny tiny book, this really did pack a punch because I had so many emotions reading this book. Yes, I did cry. That's not a big achievement. I cry at many things, but I did cry. The last maybe 15 pages of this book, I was a blubbering mess of a human. I just feel like Galis was just such an endearing character. She was so likable. She had made some terrible mistakes, but under the circumstances, I don't feel like she could be held completely responsible for the mistakes that she had made, because lies told under torture are kind of forced. When she was explaining the torture that she had experienced to Iris, my heart just broke, and it was so enraging to read because those descriptions came from research and fact. I found some of this book really infuriating to read, not through any fault of the author, but purely because a lot of the events in this book were inspired by true life and the way that women were persecuted during the witch trials. And for a lot of those women, all they had to do was just make a tiny little mistake and annoy the wrong person, and they would be accused. And once accused, that was kind of it. Not good times. So it was hard to read, and it was heartbreaking. But during that heartbreak, I really just loved the relationship between Iris and Galis. Have I been calling her Glennis? I think I might have been calling her Glennis. That's not her name. Galis is her name. And I loved their friendship and the way that they just kind of supported each other and offered each other comfort. I did find it quite ironic that Galis was offering Iris a lot of comfort, and it was Galis who was about to be facing the gallows the next day. So it kind of felt a bit like that was just her character to be offering that comfort, I suppose. But it was such an emotional and just gut-wrenching book to read, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it offered a really insightful look into the oppression that a lot of people face and how we've kind of not moved on that far as a society, really, which is not a good thing either. I liked seeing the way that these two characters, who were centuries apart, were not so different, and that was both lovely but also really sad. This book left me feeling so just like a husk of a woman. I needed something joyful afterwards. This filled me with all the sads, like in a good way. I really enjoyed it, and I think I would like to own a copy of this once I return it back to the library. One day I will. And my last Scottish book of October was Edge of the Grave by Robbie Morrison. This is one of the 22 books I wanted to read in 2022, so I'm very happy to have gotten to it. And this book takes place in 1932 in Glasgow. There is a serial killer on the loose, and the detective Dreghorn is not involved in this case. However, it turns out that he knows the very wealthy family of one of the victims. So he's drawn in and has to investigate. All the while, he's kind of facing some demons of his past that have resurfaced. I really feel like I am entering the crime fiction period of my life, because I have always read some crime fiction, but I feel I'm reading more of it. So how fortuitous that Scotland is filled with amazing Scottish crime authors. So I will have many authors from whom to choose. I really liked the slow reveal of how the murders were linked, because you knew going in that there was a serial killer. It says it on the cover, like, serial killer. So I knew there was going to be a link, but it didn't feel like there was a link. So it was really exciting trying to work out how these murders were related to each other and if any were red herrings. There were so many twists and turns, and I feel like most of the twists were very, very obvious. Like, I would have preferred if there was maybe a couple of more contenders for the big bad, because I felt like it was really obvious it could only be one of two people, and it then became very obvious which of those two people it had to be. And I would have liked if there was maybe some ambiguity about who the killer was. That would have really made this book something a bit more enjoyable. I would have liked that twist where it wasn't the person I expected it to be, or it wasn't for the reasons that it was. There was an unnecessary reveal in this book that I just feel could be taken out, because it gave me the bulk and it didn't add to the plot at all. No, I didn't like it. If you've read this book, you will know the reveal that I'm talking about. It's right near the end, and bulk. I really enjoyed the flashbacks, because there were flashbacks in this book that went to World War I, when Dreghorn was fighting in the war, and you could sort of see the way that the war had really just shaped him into the man that he was. I really liked seeing a lot of the characters as their younger selves, and I liked seeing the way that they had all been shaped. So that was really interesting. I absolutely loved McDade, who was Dreghorn's, not sidekick, partner. And he was just a gentle giant, played the bagpipes, because of course he did. And I loved him. A big bear of a man. He was just so lovely, and I hope he's in the other books, because I want to read more about McDade. He also provided, I don't think he meant to provide comic relief, but he did. Sometimes he would do things or say things and I would just find myself chuckling, and I don't think I was meant to be chuckling during a crime novel, but I did. So yeah, those were my Scottish reads for October, and I had a great time reading them, so I'm taking that as an achievement and a win. If you've read any Scottish fiction this month that you would like to chat about, let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.